I've always been a massive fan of earthbending. So when I watched Toph metal bend for the very first time, I about lost my mind. So what would happen if you took away One for All, but instead you gave Izuku or Deku a quirk that allowed him to metal bend? Well, that's what we're going to find out in this brand new What If. What if Deku had a metal manipulation quirk? Izuku Midoriya. Yes, the main character, Deku, was born with a quirk. But this quirk was a little bit different than you would possibly imagine. Now, when at a young age of about 4 or so, he would go to the doctors. His mother and him would walk into the doctor's office, and the doctor would begin to speak, talking to Izuku and also his mother. They would speak about what his quirk is like and, well, what he can do with it. He would learn that his quirk is some sort of metal bending, maybe even metal manipulation. Yes, this is broad, and yes, Izuku has no idea how he'll utilize this, at least at a young age, especially because he's only 4 years old. But at the same time, he's interested. What's gonna happen? What is he gonna be able to do? How is he gonna do it? He's not so sure. Well, his mother would be listening pretty intently. She would ask a bunch of questions about how his quirk would work, but the quirk doctor, of course, would say that he really doesn't have that much of a clue. But his quirk seems to be extremely strong. I mean, it seems to have a lot of potential. Izuku is happy to at least hear this. And Inko begins to just try to think about any ways for him to utilize his quirk. Izuku would head out, and obviously head out with his mother, and they would begin to drive home. Izuku would begin to think about what he can do, what he'll be able to do, what can he do, anything. He's just beginning to think more and more. But while driving down the road, he looks up while he's looking at his hands, and he sees a car barreling toward them. His mother tries to swerve and is able to get out of the way, but as she does, it seems as if they're about to slam right into a metal pole. Izuku would scream and put his hands out, and as he does, the metal pole would bend around them, as if, well, it braces their impact but doesn't even put a dent in the car, as if he turned the metal into this soft material and then spread it all around the car itself, like a giant pillow. It might sound crazy, but out of a complete necessity, he was able to do this. His mother is completely shocked, as the pole would eventually go back to normal after they back up from the pole. She's obviously happy that he was able to save them, but confusion would be all over her face. How was he able to do that? That was insane. How was he able to manipulate metal in such a way, and he just figured out what his quirk was. He just used it. I mean, like I said, of course, out of necessity, many humans, doesn't matter what age, can truly do some amazing things. Izuku making a giant pole into a pillow-like fabric seems to be practically impossible, but at the same time, just insane. Izuku would head home with his mother, and they would both be pretty happy. It seems like Izuku's gonna be an amazing hero. He just needs to start working, start training, and getting ready. Izuku would be happy to hear this, and he would just do small things with metal. We're talking about he would get small little metal balls and kind of just throw them up and down and have them levitate, and he would try to mold them in certain ways. Of course, this is pretty difficult. I mean, he's doing it without pure being scared or being terrified or being mad, being sad, whatever. No emotions are involved, so it takes a lot more focus. But in doing this, he's really reminding himself over and over again how he should be manipulating metal, how he should be utilizing it, how he should be bending it. It's something that Izuku wants to figure out. It's as if it's like some sort of flow state, you could call it. He's just throwing them up and down, swinging them around his hands, making them float around him, and so on. He would do this, and it was like a cool little party trick. Actually, when he would go to school the next day, he would show this off. and everybody would be excited. They would think it's sick. I mean, what does he have? Some form of levitation? And Izuku would say, no, it's actually just some sort of metal bending, metal floating, or something like that. He didn't really understand it fully, but he's able to do some cool things. Of course, Izuku stays away from telling his classmates that they straight up almost died in a car crash, but still, he was able to save his mother that day, so it's kind of just proof that the strength that he has is kind of insane, at least in the grand scheme of things. Izuku would continue working, continue training, and continue using his quirk. While he's at school, he would more or less use his quirk underneath his desk over and over again just to continue the usage of it. He wants to make sure he gets it down, and eventually he wants to use anything around him, any metal, anything that has metal in it. He wants to be able to casually flick it to his hand or casually move it around. Same thing if he goes out and has to move something, he can more or less put some metal inside of it. Maybe it's a giant drawer. Putting metal inside that drawer would allow him to pick up the drawer with relative ease. So Izuku would just help out around the house with his quirk, and this would be in a way for him to train. It'd be a way for him to just get used to it, get ready and prepared, and it would give his mother a chance to, well, relax sometimes. I mean, as a single mother, she must be stressed out all the time. And frankly, that's exactly what it is. So it's nice for her to have a couple time off or a couple hours off and stuff like that. So it's cool. I mean, he gets to give her that time off and they both can have, well, some free time. He would continue to keep up with his studies, continue to work as much as possible, and just flat out trade. I mean, that's what he would need to do, that's what he needs to do, and that's what he will do. And for over this time, he'll be very rational about it. He doesn't want to get himself hurt or anything, but that's what he does. He trains a bit here and there. He helps around the house with his quirk, and he's able to just have a good time throughout his middle school years and his younger years and so on. Izuku would finally get to the end of school, the end of middle school, of course, and he would begin to just speak with the people around him. While he's talking to everybody, the teacher would finally walk inside the classroom. The teacher would begin talking about what they're going to be doing, what he wants to see, and talks about giving them some sort of evaluation for what job they should be doing. But that ends up not happening because he knows everybody wants to do their own hero thing and wants to be heroes all around. So he throws the papers in the sky and tells them just that. He tells them all that he knows they all want to go the hero route, in which that is true. But there's very few people in that classroom that are even capable of doing so. That's, well, two people, Izuku Midoriya and Katsuki Bakugo. But Bakugo makes it very clear, very, very clear, that Izuku is not even going to be close, not even close to keeping up. He won't even stand a chance once they truly begin to fight and once they truly begin to show what they have. Izuku doesn't listen much to Bakugo. I mean, this is what he always does. Rambles on and on about how he's better at this and better at that. Izuku doesn't necessarily care, so he doesn't necessarily listen. He just sits there and just awaits the teacher to continue on, but Bakugo then is about to slap him in the back of the head. But as Bakugo goes to do this, a marble of some sorts would be in his sleeve and would be pulling back his arm. Izuku would tell Bakugo that that's not the best choice. Definitely not the best choice. Don't try to sneak him. Don't try to cheap shot him. That's something that's villains do, right? Of course, Bakugo would move back his hand, throwing the marble back at Izuku as it would stop before even hitting him and enter his pocket once again. Izuku would shake his head as the teacher would explain to them everything else that needs to happen, and about Bakugo and Izuku going to UA. Now this is an amazing thing for them, and the teacher says that they're going to make all of them so proud and they can't wait to see what they can do as future heroes. But there's still a long way to go. There's still a lot of hurdles that they're going to have to jump through, and of course they know that. I mean, there's no way around it, and that's just the reality of it. So Izuku and Bakugo would listen to the rest of the class and whatever would happen next, and they would eventually leave. Izuku would be confronted by Bakugo. Bakugo would tell him to not make a fool out of him. There is no way Izuku's getting into UA, at least not ahead of Bakugo, or not ahead of himself. Bakugo says he'll be leagues above Izuku. His quirk is better, he's just flat out a better hero. Izuku disagrees, saying that they'll have to see in the near future, but he's pretty sure that he has Bakugo beat. Bakugo would get real mad about this, be really angry about Izuku even saying something like this, but Izuku doesn't really say much after it. He leaves and continues to write in his journal. When writing in his journal, Izuku would write down all of the different ways that he can truly utilize his metal manipulation quirk, and there are a lot of ways for him to do so. It's really a wide range of ideas when you think about it. A range from, well, maybe creating weapons to more or less using it as protection, kind of like what he did against Bakugo. But there's a lot of different ways to use it, and frankly, at the end of the day, there may be too many ways to use it. I mean, it might end up being where, well, he might kind of run out of ideas pretty soon and run out of the creativity of it. But still, he's pretty well off in terms of what he's been doing and what he's going to continue doing. So he's happy to know that, well, he can at least get through the majority of more or less the ideas that he has on paper already. Izuku would be writing things down as he walks under a bridge. When he walks under that said bridge, though, he hears something behind him. It's as if the metal pipes underneath him are creaking, and as if everything around him is telling him to move. Izuku's confused, but as he is confused, he sees a manhole cover smash open into the ceiling or underneath the bridge, and a giant sludge-like monster appears. The sludge-like monster would be holding the manhole cover that it's on top of his head, soaking it into his body. Izuku would be shocked to see this, and the sludge villain would come charging after Izuku, full speed. But as Izuku begins to run away, he realizes something. The manhole cover just went within the sludge villain. He puts out his hand, and the manhole cover is actually made of mostly metal. He's shocked to feel this because he can actually sense it, and he pushes the sludge villain backwards, and actually pushing him back a good bit. As Izuku is holding back the sludge villain, he can feel more and more metal within the sludge villain's body. It seems odd. It's as if he can sense metal all around him, but in that small instant, it would all go away. He would hone back in on the sludge villain, and every piece of that villain he would hold still. His hands felt like they were beginning to crack, but he would hold them still, and eventually he would hear a loud thud. And then on top of that, a loud blast of wind. The wind would whistle through underneath the bridge and underneath the bit that they're currently at. And that whistle of sound would then slam into the sludge villain, breaking him apart and shattering all that is within him. Izuku would look to see a glimpse of this giant person. He would get sent flying, but able to recover slightly by grabbing onto a pole and mending his fall. Izuku would look up to see the one and only All Might. All Might is there to save the day, and once again, he's able to shut down another villain. He gets help from Izuku to patch up and grab all the substance from the sludge villain, in which Izuku takes some of the metal that is currently sparsed all over the ground to make a container to contain all of it in one object. Izuku gives it to All Might, but is still really shocked. I mean, he's staring at All Might intently, seeing that, well, this is the #1 hero. This is the person he's been idolizing for so long. Izuku is happy to see him here and happy he was able to save him, but he has so many questions. But the only thing that could really utter out of his mouth is if he can get an autograph. Eventually getting the autograph, which, let's be honest, isn't that much of an autograph. It kind of just says All Might and that's about it. But still, he's happy to get something. He asks All Might if the path to being a hero is something that he could truly go down. He wants to be a UA student. He wants to be just like him. All Might says that he can definitely be a hero, 100%, but don't shoot to be just like him. Shoot to be better than him. All Might would jump off with the small metal box containing the sludge villain, and Izuku would watch as his hero would jump building to building, leaving. Izuku would nod as if he can feel this rush of adrenaline from the idea that All Might just presented. Be better than him. Izuku hears that ring in his mind over and over and over again as he heads back home. He begins to tell his mother what happened, and of course she's concerned, but at the same time, she's never seen Izuku so motivated in his life. He begins training, working, and just drilling himself over and over again, using the metal that he has in his pockets and obviously the stuff that he holds onto himself to basically manipulate and utilize in every scenario he can possibly see that fits. He begins to look at YouTube videos of fighting and other Japanese masters that are insanely good at martial arts, and Izuku would utilize his own style, implementing it into his fight style and how he would fend off villains. He would more or less go to different parks and kind of spar with trees. It might sound crazy, but he would act as if the tree was someone he was fighting. He would circle, he would dip in and out, and he would move and utilize the metal he has in different and various ways, being that of a circular format, liquefying the metal and then reforming it in more of like a hula hoop type of shape, and then utilizing that metal to disperse it, shooting into the tree's roots or the legs, quote unquote, and also the arms and so on. Just target practice. And sometimes he would even form the metal into weaponry, realizing that if he can make a bow staff on a whim, he might be able to more or less catch people off guard. A bow staff, maybe even like a small little dagger. Yes, he doesn't want to kill somebody, but at least it could put a slow to somebody that is moving at insane speeds toward him. With that said, though, the training was a massive part of Izuku's game plan. Work as hard as possible and get ready for what's to come. Get ready to be a hero. Yeah, he has hurdles, and yes, he's gonna have to go through the entrance exam, but everything seems to fit in place for him. All like just one big jigsaw puzzle. This one big puzzle piece. That's all Izuku can think about. And finally, the day would come. Finally, the day of the UA entrance exam would be on the horizon. He studied, he trained, and he worked hard. And now it's time to prove exactly what he can do. He would begin walking over, and as he walks over, he begins to shuffle through his pockets, making sure he has everything he needs. But just as he's looking through his pockets, he trips. He trips and everything goes flying everywhere. But before he can faceplant on the ground, some girl stops him from actually faceplanting on the ground. Her name is Ochako Uraraka, someone that has some sort of gravity like Quirk. He's floating and he immediately manipulates metal so that, well, they go back into his pocket. He was trying to look around and see if he had everything and just double checking, but frankly he could have sensed that he had everything and he was just, let's be honest, just overly nervous. Still though, I mean, it's kind of something that Izuku would do. He's extremely nervous a lot of the time, and this would be no different. Even in front of a girl, yes, he's had more social interactions and he was a lot more popular, but being the awkward self he is, I mean, he could barely even talk to her, saying hi and thank you, and that's really about it. She leaves and heads into the UA entrance exam area, and Izuku would do the same. Izuku would sit by Bakugo, not obviously by option or by his own warrant. He actually had to sit by him based on a placing card, in which he does, but Bakugo just kind of yaps his ear off, talking about how there's no way he's going to win, no way he's going to be better than him, and yeah, you know, the normal Bakugo things. Still though, Izuku keeps his head on a swivel, ready to go, staying locked in entirely because he knows it's all up to this. He knows that all that matters is what is to come. So he waits President Mike to speak about what's going to happen. He hears about the practical, but also the written. The written is relatively easy for Izuku. I mean, he's not super dumb. I mean, he's pretty smart. Far good enough to at least excel in the written portion of the exam. What is to come is kind of what's supposed to be the challenging part. you got a bunch of robots, and Present Mike explains just that. I mean, there's a ton of robots. They're harder based on, well, the number of points they can give, but there's something that's, well, wasn't really proportioned for Izuku himself, and that's the fact that they're made of metal. I mean, I think we could all guess this. Izuku would walk in and look around, and he would await the gates to swing open, and he would just be ready, locked in, and just ready to go. Once the gates swung open, he would immediately dart off, sprinting as fast as possible. Many others behind him say he's cheating, saying that, oh, well, he's not allowed to leave until well, they say go. But it's not true. President Mike actually says that there's no countdown in a real battle, so they better get going right now or they're gonna get left in the dust. Izuku, already ahead, he's now destroying robot after robot, but he's using the robots to destroy each other. He's literally controlling all of them. Izuku thinks of something funny and thinks he should do something that would off-put everyone else. I mean, he's feeling real competitive right now, and he knows damn well that Bakugo is thinking the same thing. He uses the metal on the side of the buildings to create kind of like a makeshift ladder, turning it into some sort of like a propellant to allow him to go up. He lands on the top of a building, and he looks over the top, seeing a ton of robots all around. He smiles, and all he can think about is being able to just destroy all of them in a matter of seconds. He begins to focus as hard as possible as the smile grows wider on his face, and Izuku would clench his fist, and a ton, and I mean a ton, the mass majority, probably 85% of the robots would implode, obliterating, and everybody would be in complete shock. I mean, what the hell just even happened? How did he even do that? Everyone's completely angry on top of it because this kid just stole all the points. How are they even gonna pass now? Izuku kind of laughs about this, and the speaker actually comes on talking about how there's actually not really enough robots now for anybody else to pass. Izuku finds this to be absolutely hilarious. I mean, he just did all of that in one fell swoop. They really shouldn't have made something like this so easy for someone like him. I mean, come on. If anybody else had some sort of metal or some sort of electricity manipulation type of quirk, well, I mean, it would have been game over for all of them. Maybe they'll have to think about changing up this whole thing they got going here. Izuku would then just hear the sirens blare once again, and they would tell him and everybody else that they'll be going home for the day. And for the person that destroyed all of them, they know who it is, and congratulations, they got into UA. Izuku would kind of laugh this off as he hovers his way back down to the ground using some metal poles, and he just leaves. I mean, that's about it. I mean, he's excited. I mean, he made his imprint. He made his idea and him being the best shown. And now everybody knows what he's capable of and what he can truly do. And that's all that matters to Izuku. That's all he could think about. All Izuku wanted to do was prove that he's the best. Maybe it's a Bakugo pressuring him thing, or maybe it's just for the fact that he just wants to show everyone else that he can truly do some extraordinary things. And, well, he was able to do just that. He would head home and tell his mother the news, and his mom would be insanely proud of him. I mean, who wouldn't be, right? Izuku is setting himself for an amazing journey to be a hero. His powers seem to be accelerating and getting stronger by the day, and it seems like, well, he can't miss. It seems like he's just going to continue to grow and continue to get stronger every single time he steps foot on any surface. And now it's time for him to take the next leap, and that's into UA. After some time and after waiting a little bit, he would finally hear back from UA. He knows he made it, but they still have to send out the messages via formality. And Izuku would get his little message, hearing that he made it from the one and only All Might. All Might would tell him exactly how he did, and, well, it's just flat out impressive. The #1 student in the entrance exam. That's a hell of a thing. Izuku would smile as he nods, listening to All Might speak about this, and All Might would tell him that he has a lot more work to be done, but he can tell that Izuku's progression is going to be insane. Some time would pass, and finally Izuku would head off to UA. The first day was upon him. And when he would arrive in the classroom, he would speak with many, many students. People ranging from Tenya Ida, who's more or less that class nerd that wants everybody to do the right thing. Momo, who is the class nerd, but at the same time pretty well put together. And some other people that are around as well, excluding Bakugo. He doesn't really want to talk to Bakugo, especially after the fact that he got first place, and now Bakugo is tripping out, thinking that Izuku did something underhanded. But yeah, of course he didn't. I mean, that's just Bakugo being Bakugo. With that said though, not much time would pass, and eventually it would lead to Aizawa walking in. Aizawa would walk in and immediately tell all of them to get ready and get prepared, because they're going to be testing all of their strengths, all of their weaknesses, and seeing how strong they really are. He points toward Izuku, saying that this is the kid that broke their system in terms of the UA entrance exam, so they can thank him for harder tests in the future. Izuku shrugs his shoulders a little bit, but Bakugo is just pissed to hear this. He wanted to be the one to break the system. He wanted to be the one like All Might. He wanted to show everybody that he was the powerful one. But let's be honest, Bakugo was strong, extremely powerful. But the one issue is that the entrance exam catered toward Izuku's abilities so heavily. So of course he broke the system. I mean, it was kind of just an eventuality. It was going to happen eventually, no matter what. Of course, though, they would go on like normal. The Quirk assessment test would be an interesting, very interesting, way to see how everybody's quirk is. Izuku is kind of having to get extremely creative. The tennis ball throw, or the baseball throw, excuse me, he would have to utilize metal that he has on him to mostly surround the ball and allow it to more or less throw extremely far. He's not going to get infinity. He's going to get it pretty darn far, but nothing insane. He watches as Ochako gets infinity and watches as all these other people do actually better than him. And that's just going to happen. Izuku in this regard isn't going to be in the best position possible, but still, he's okay with that. He's not he's not really tripping about how strong or how powerful other people are based on one little regiment. It doesn't really matter to him. In terms of the other portions of the quirk assessment, he does extremely well. I mean, he does extremely well on everything. He, like I said, gets really creative with what he has to do and how he does it and so on. So in an overall grand scheme of things, he actually does extremely well. Does he get number one? Probably not. He gets pretty darn close to number one, in the top 3 at least, bare minimum, and there was no fear of him getting expelled by Aizawa. But of course Aizawa would come around and basically say that it was all a ruse to make them try their hardest. But even Izuku feels a little bit uneasy about that statement, believing that he's kind of lying about it. But still, he's not going to question it. It's none of his business anyways. Izuku would listen to Aizawa as he speaks more and more about what's going on and what's happening, and all Izuku can think about is the training that's going to follow ahead. What in the world are they going to do next? They did something really basic in all reality right now, but what are they going to do next time? What is the training going to look like next time? And the next day he would get that answer, especially when the door would blast open and the one and only All Might would be standing in front of them. Yes, All Might, the pro hero that is above all pro heroes, the pro hero that has changed society forever, that's broken the criminal rate or the crime rates and has more or less brought peace to Japan for so long. This is the one who's going to be teaching them, and this is the one who's going to be showing them the ropes. With one I am here walking through the door like a normal person, he would tell them all to get ready, get on their hero outfits, and get ready for some heroes versus villains training. Izuku sees this as a way to finally take on, even greater challenges. That includes going head to head with his rival, Bakugo. So when he hears that it's him and Ochako Uraraka versus Bakugo and Tenya Ida, all he can think about is how he's going to show Bakugo how much better he truly is than him. Izuku is ready to take down Bakugo and show him that there's no chance of him keeping up. With that said though, we're going to have to leave that off to the next part. Deku has now finally been given a chance to take on Katsuki Bakugo. Now this is something that he's been looking forward to for a while now. Of course he's been enjoying training. Of course he's been enjoying various other things as well in terms of, well, UA. But this is what he was looking forward to. Heroes versus villains, Izuku Midoriya and Katsuki Bakugo. That's who he wants to go against. That's who he wants to take on. He wants to prove to Bakugo that nothing is a fluke, that he is so far ahead of him. Izuku would face off with Bakugo relatively quickly. And frankly, that's mostly because Bakugo just wants to take on Izuku as quick as possible as well. Him and Bakugo would face off right when the timer hits 0. Bakugo would come launching down the staircase to be face to face with Izuku, and they would stare daggers into each other, ready for conflict, ready for a fight. Izuku would stand his ground and tell Ochako to head upstairs to go find where the bomb is, that he'll handle this. Immediately, he would reach out his hand, and a bow staff would appear in front of him. He grabs the bow staff and tells Bakugo to hurry up, because he's getting bored. He tells Bakugo to hurry and face him right now. Bakugo comes charging forward, trying to blast Izuku in the face, but that is nowhere near as easy as you would even expect. Izuku would dodge relatively easily too, would slam his bow staff into the chest of Bakugo, but it wraps around Bakugo. He begins to restrain Bakugo entirely, as if he's putting chains all around him. The more he does this, he slams the chains into the ground, stemming right into the core of the concrete. Bakugo is stuck, no longer able to move, as metal wraps around his arms and restricts them, smashing his gauntlets and also restricting them entirely. Izuku makes it so Bakugo can't even move an inch. Izuku would then kind of lecture Bakugo, telling him that he talks so big. He plays up this huge game that he's so strong, so this and so that. But look at him. He's stuck, not able to move an inch. Izuku would kick him in the stomach and tell him again, "You talk so much trash, Kachan. I don't get it. I really don't." Izuku would tell Bakugo that this right here is exactly how everything will end up, is if he doesn't adapt what he is. If he doesn't put in the work to change so much about him. Izuku would capture tape Bakugo, and of course, I mean, let's be honest, he's already chained to the ground entirely, so it's not like he's moving in general. Izuku would like practically run up the stairs or fly up the stairs at insane speeds, just a lot faster than anybody else could really believe. I mean, he would just use the metal on his body or around him that he currently has in his pockets and stuff like that to kind of yank him up the staircase. That's the best explanation you could really get. He's not flying necessarily, but he might be able to do that, but probably needs to be in more open space. Eventually he would arrive where the bomb is, and that's where Ochako and Tenya Ida are currently fighting. But this was simple. Izuku immediately would just bend the bomb to his will, wrapping the bomb back toward them as he touches it, saying that it's already over, and it's been over for a while. He just needed to show Bakugo who really was the best here. The speakers come on, and All Might says that the heroes have won, as Ochako and Izuku head off, and with Bakugo and Tenya Ida to where All Might is currently at. Bakugo kind of silent, but anger is seething throughout his body. He is pissed. He doesn't want to be overshadowed or staged up by Izuku ever again, and he's going to make sure that never happens again. Izuku would just be standing there as All Might's just talking, telling them what they did right, what they did wrong, what they could do better, and so on and so forth. But after a while would pass, they would watch the other people go about their heroes versus villains training, and it would finally be time to head off. Izuku would just listen to everything that's been going on, and honestly just think about what he could do to make himself even stronger. He stopped thinking about Bakugo on his way home, but Bakugo, well, he's pissed, angry, frustrated. I mean, why wouldn't he be? He was just shown up. He was just, well, overshadowed by a mile. It wasn't even close, not even a fraction of what Izuku can do, he showed right in front of him. Izuku can probably do even more. And frankly, Bakugo is practically countered. I mean, Izuku's whole quirk, being that of metal manipulation, more or less counters what Bakugo can do. Bakugo can't even shoot an explosion strong enough to break or shatter the metal that he creates or adapts, in which Bakugo is just frustrated at that fact, getting so angry with himself. The next day, though, Bakugo would be determined. Whatever challenges they go up against next, he'll be better than Izuku. And maybe this is good for him. Maybe this is good for Bakugo. He knows that there's a challenge ahead, and now he knows that he needs to face it full head of steam. But we'll have to see in the long run if Bakugo can really make himself better from what he was comparatively in the heroes versus villains training. When they talk in the classroom, Aizawa tells them that the next thing up is the USJ. The USJ is a rescue facility, and they're going to be learning a lot more in terms of hero work. Hero work has a lot to do with rescue. You can't just fight people. That's kind of doesn't really make sense. So the USJ will teach them different scenarios. We're talking about mountainous terrains, giant buildings, fires, water lakes that have crashed boats, and so on and so forth. And Aizawa would tell them all to hop on the bus, and they would head off there relatively soon. While they're heading over there, they all talk about who they think has the strongest of the strongest quirks, in which it really comes down to both Todoroki and also, well, Izuku. Now, this is where question marks come into play. Can Todoroki counter Izuku? Well, maybe with his fire, but he doesn't even use his fire, or at least they haven't seen him use his fire, and they have no idea why he won't use his fire. In which they kind of come to the conclusion that Izuku's the strongest, because if Todoroki doesn't use his fire and only uses his ice, Izuku kind of just, well, walls him. Nothing he can do about it. But there could be conclusions that were set that, frankly, if Izuku just uses his own quirk, he might even be able to stop the fire Todoroki produces. I mean, we don't know that for sure, but I mean, we'll have to see in the near future, I guess. Izuku wouldn't really be participating in this. He would just kind of be messing around with the metal in his pockets as he kind of juggles it back and forth. Not really, nobody really even noticing as he's floating it around his head. Izuku doesn't really care about this conversation at all. All he can think about is what's to come and what's going to happen. So when the bus stops, he immediately stands up and gets ready to move. Aizawa tells them all to head into the USJ as they're greeted by Pro Hero 13. Ochako would be extremely excited. I mean, this is her favorite pro hero and so on, and role model, whatever. And she's all excited, asking for autographs later, whatever. And Izuku would just be not paying that much attention, just moving his metal around his body over and over again. And Aizawa would tap him on the shoulder, telling him to kind of listen up, that he has to be paying attention. And Izuku nods and apologizes as he focuses on the voice of Pro Hero 13. As he does this, though, he focuses on something else. He begins to feel this odd disturbance, as if something else is coming. You have to realize, Izuku can sense most of the things around him. I mean, just through metal itself, right? And he feels all of this odd, well, feelings coming from this well, or this maybe a fountain in the middle of the USJ. And he's kind of off-putted by it. He doesn't know what it is, how he's feeling it. He can sense more or less everybody around him because they're all standing on pieces of metal, or all standing on stuff that has metal within it, so we can kind of get a picture of how many people are there currently. But what is going on over there? He keeps looking toward the fountain, and he's just not sure. He tilts his head and is just confused. What is going on? Why am I feeling this way? As he thinks this, though, well, the reason why shows up relatively quickly, and that's because of the villains, the League of Villains. The League of Villains would show up, Shigaraki included, and they would all begin their attack. I mean, they're looking for All Might, but All Might is currently not there. Fine with them, they'll just kill some of these kids that are currently here to drag All Might out. So that's exactly what they're going to do. Eventually, Aizawa would jump into action. And frankly, he would be able to fend off most of the people, most of the villains, and most of these troublemakers in general. But at the same time, the portal that Kurogiri uses separates most, if not all of them. Izuku would be put into water, in which is kind of inconvenient in a way, and he tries to sense if there's any metal all around, in which he does, but it's kind of in odd spots. He grabs onto a piece of metal that he has in his pocket, or a bunch of marbles, and he grabs onto one and basically makes him float up to the top extremely quick, and then immediately would use the metal as kind of like a rope. He uses it to latch on to the boat near him, and just as he's about to pull himself up, something else grabs him. Asui grabs him, pulling him out of the water, and it's because, well, villains were about to take his head off. Izuku thanks her and says that he definitely owes her one, and in which Asui says that's definitely not the case. He doesn't owe her anything. She's just doing what a hero would do. Izuku would give her a bit of a thumbs up and asks how she and also whatever that thing is, pointing at Mineta, wants to get off of here. Immediately she asks that if he could somehow give them a boost, maybe she can jump the rest of the way. But Izuku says that they should be able to get another way out, as long as, well, there's enough metal. She's confused, and he throws all the marbles out of his pockets and begins to mold like a surfboard of some sorts. But he says that he doesn't have enough. It's too small. Everybody's not gonna fit. Izuku then says that, well, it's a little bit odd, but he could also try to take the metal from the boat. In which they think this is a crazy idea. I mean, if he pulls out the one wrong thing, just one wrong thing, the boat will sink extremely quick. In which Izuku says he knows, but he should be able to create a big enough platform for them. In which Asui says that he trusts him, might as well, or she trusts him, might as well try it out. In which Izuku quickly would form a bit of a surfboard as he would grab the other two and throw them on. Izuku would jump on as well, and immediately he would begin to move up and down, as if he's kind of riding in the water or streaming in the water and trying to get like a boogie board to move forward. Izuku continues to do this, and eventually it's perfect. It begins to just sail in a straight line, and they're just hovering above the water as they glide right through. Izuku says that the monsters or the villains that are currently in the water may become an issue later, but if they decide to come out of the water, there will be no issue at all. Asui says that it shouldn't really be a problem in the long run, because knowing the villains, they probably just planned for certain environments. They obviously didn't plan for this environment, or this environment specifically based around the students. Izuku thinks about it and says that does make sense. They eventually land, and Izuku would just consume the metal back once again into kind of like a bigger ball, shrinking the ball, but knowing that it's so condensed that he could make more and bigger platforms out of it. He might be able to manipulate metal, but he can't really poof it out of existence or in existence, so he kind of tries to condense it in a small ball. He puts it back in his pocket, saying to not really worry right now, that it looks like Aizawa is definitely holding his own. As Izuku says this though, it looks like the Nomu is about to come and play. Izuku would fear that Aizawa won't be enough to do anything, so he sends out a little piece of metal to try to trip up the Nomu. It's as if he's trying to pull the Nomu's leg out from underneath him, in which he's able to do so, but not to the extent he thought. He made it so that this metal rope was razor sharp, and he cuts right through the Nomu's leg, just for the Nomu to trip, faceplant, and then just regenerate his leg, in which is definitely something very concerning. Aizawa looks to his side to see that Izuku and Asui and also Mineta are right there, but Izuku sends Asui and Mineta away, and Asui, obviously being able to jump really far, is able to get away pretty quickly. Izuku though would look to his left to see one thing, a hand coming out of a portal. Izuku immediately would flick his wrist, and a piece of metal would more or less appear right in front of his face as Shigaraki grabs onto it. Aizawa sees this, and it's as if he was just too late to stop the hand from disintegrating something, and he's just in complete awe that Izuku's reaction time was that insane. Shigaraki even remarks about this.
Yeah, you know what? That kid over there, he's pretty good, Eraserhead. You've been teaching him good. Teaching him real good.
Izuku is kind of weirded out. This guy is just insane. What the hell is wrong with him? Izuku would immediately move using the metal around him, kind of surfing through the area to get away. And Aizawa is then picked up by Izuku as well for them to try and get out of there too. He would throw Aizawa into kind of a safety-like area, but he would see a portal beginning to open as if Shigaraki is on the attack once again. Izuku shakes his head as he's able to kind of block Shigaraki once again, but he realizes that the portal guy, there's something odd about him. Wait, he senses it. He looks towards Shigaraki. Wow, you guys are stupid. You guys don't know any of our quirks, do you? Immediately, Shigaraki is confused.
Who are you calling stupid? You're just a dumb kid.
Immediately, Izuku smiles. Yeah, a dumb kid, sure. He would put out his hand and throw Kurogiri across the USJ, slamming him into a wall and then repeatedly doing it over and over again. Shigaraki's confused.
What the hell? How is he doing that?
Of course, Izuku's not saying a word. He doesn't care. He just knows that he can control it. Izuku then screams toward an incoming Bakugo, telling Bakugo that Kurogiri has a weak spot. He has a metal armor that is protecting him. The smirk on Bakugo's face would grow wide, and he would tell the Warp Gate person that it's obvious that he's not invincible. Far from it. Izuku would then throw Kurogiri toward Bakugo, and immediately Bakugo would land exactly where the metal is. It's kind of like Izuku was able to tell Bakugo where that little piece of metal was, or the protection was, and Bakugo puts a hand on it and begins to explode it, hurting Kurogiri and taming the Quirk and also the villain himself there for a minute. Of course, Shigaraki would try to make his move, especially with his Nomu, and Izuku would try to stop Shigaraki at all means, sending waves of metal, using it from the ground and from anywhere he possibly can, but it's really restricted. There's not that much metal at the moment. He could try and get it from different areas, but that's going to take so much out of him. It's going to make him so exhausted that it might actually hurt them more than help them. So he tries to fend them off as much as possible until the Nomu is right in front of him. He's about to try and pull himself away, but then his leg is grabbed. He's immediately thinking that he's dead. Oh shit, this isn't good. Izuku is picked up and is about to get slammed into the ground, and he tries to soften the blow, immediately waving his hand, trying to make the ground itself softer, but there's not enough metal in the ground itself. It's still going to hurt like hell. And as Izuku is about to get slammed into the ground, a punch comes out from nowhere. But this feeling, the shockwave, the air blowing by him, he's felt this before. He looks up, and it's All Might. All Might has finally arrived. The one and only #1 hero says, I am here, and he's here to truly save the day. Izuku recovers and tells All Might that he has his back. He'll help from afar, and he'll be able to give him openings that he wouldn't have initially. All Might says that he shouldn't need it, but Izuku reminds All Might that this thing is made to kill him, so they need every advantage they possibly can get. Izuku basically convinces All Might, and All Might asks if he could control the Nomu, if he can stop the Nomu in some sort of way, but Izuku shakes his head, saying there's not enough metal within him, and frankly, he doesn't even know if he would be able to do so with a being like that. Well, at least that's his thought right now. All Might begins to fight the Nomu, and Izuku is able to give him openings and also stop Shigaraki from even moving an inch. But it's obvious, very, very obvious, that, well, Shigaraki and Kurogiri, they need to get the hell out of there. Because whatever that kid, whatever his quirk is, and whatever they didn't study up on, he's becoming an X Factor. He's becoming something they are not equipped to deal with. Izuku tries to more or less stop them from leaving. Portals begin to open, Shigaraki falls through, and Kurogiri tries to get out as well. He tries to grab Kurogiri and hold him still, but he hasn't used his quirk this much in a long time, if not ever. So when he grabs Kurogiri, forcing him to stop, trying to get him to stay still, he eventually would let go, releasing his grip, and he's unable to hold Kurogiri still as Izuku falls backwards. He would curse himself, saying that he should have been stronger, but Aizawa picks him up, putting him on his shoulder, and more or less saying that he did good, far better than most pro heroes would have done. He helps Izuku because he can tell that not only Izuku's hands are practically throbbing, but his whole body seems to kind of be vibrating in a way. It's as if he's kind of overdone it to a certain extent. Izuku's control over his quirk may seem amazing, and it is really, really amazing. But at the same time, his body isn't really fit enough to do as much as he just did. He did some insane things, holding off monstrous people, stopping Shigaraki from absolutely disintegrating his face in, and so on and so forth. And he just helped All Might take down Anomu. So, I mean, you can't really think too far ahead of that. I mean, he was trying so hard and doing so much. Maybe he was just running on fumes. Maybe he was just running on his adrenaline. Still, though, he did a hell of a job. He'd be taken away to Recovery Girl, in which he would be healed, but she would say that he just needs rest time, and he should be able to get enough time to kind of relax and rest, especially with a couple days off. So everybody would get a couple days off, Izuku included, being able to rest, relax, and get prepared. And it's something he wants to get prepared for sure, because the UA Sports Festival is coming very soon. Soon and very, very soon. Izuku would hear about this, and also in the next class, after a couple days would pass, would hear what they would have to do. And actually, Izuku would have a bit of a speech. So at the UA Sports Festival, he would step up to the podium and begin talking to everybody, saying that they're going to give one heck of a performance and they'll entertain everybody, and he'll do his absolute best to be the winner. But he knows, if all else fails, that everybody will be entertained. Izuku gets a standing ovation as he walks down, and most of his classmates are basically giving him a round of applause, thanking him, thinking that he's awesome, blah, blah, blah. I mean, come on. I mean, you saw how much he did, and you heard how much he did in the USJ. And rumors spread like wildfire. So let's just say many, 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 many people are pretty high on Izuku, thinking that he's amazing, thinking he's the best, thinking he's great, blah, blah, blah. And Izuku is happy that he's getting this attention and this recognition, so he's not too down about it at all, that's for sure. Izuku would then await the first bit of the games, and the first, obstacle being the obstacle course race. Midnight would tell them that the obstacle course race consists of multiple areas, and let's just say Izuku would have a field day with this. The corridor is a little bit difficult. I mean, he would have to kind of get through there by any means. But once he gets through there, I mean, he just straight up runs by the robots. The robots don't hit him. He can just make sure that they don't, and that he makes it so the robots kind of just flood and attack everybody else. And on top of that, they kind of just like fall over onto the other people there, and so on and so forth. So when he blitzes through, it's as if he's stalling for time, so much so. In terms of the giant canyon, he can get over relatively easily using kind of the same idea and the same logic of the surfboard. But at the same time, it's only one of him, so he doesn't really need a huge surfboard. He just kind of runs across as he makes metal go underneath his feet as if it was just the ground itself. He just walks across and eventually would arrive at the minefield. And I think we all know what's going to happen at the minefield. He can literally sense where all of them are, manipulating where they are and where they're going to be, and he kind of just runs by them. Of course, Todoroki and Bakugo is hot on his trail, using their quirks, their quirks. They're able to kind of catch up, but there wasn't really a way for them to 100% catch up. There wasn't a way for them to really even get through, at least quicker than Izuku, because Izuku would pass the obstacle course race faster than really anyone has ever done before. It kind of just plays into his quirk so well that it doesn't necessarily matter in the long run. And in terms of the next thing, after, well, Izuku watches everybody finish the obstacle course race, it's the cavalry battle. And let's just say, yeah, he might have the 10 million points and so on, but people wouldn't be that afraid to go with him. I mean, in terms of the cavalry battle and teaming up with him, there is no fear there. I mean, Izuku's so strong. He has metal on him. I mean, he can probably manipulate so many of the people on the field anyways, because sometimes certain people have zippers or pockets that have metal or whatever and so on. So Izuku is able to kind of fend off everybody. But for simplistic sake, let's just say that he kind of gets the same team. We're talking Meihatsume, Tokiyami, and Ochako Uraraka. Because frankly, this team would be a solid one. I mean, the defense of this team would be absolutely insane. Izuku defending one side and Tokiyami's Dark Shadow defending the other. I mean, Tokiyami would literally be able to have Dark Shadow utilize the shade that Izuku creates with the metal that he makes as a way for Dark Shadow to be even stronger. And on top of that, well, let's just say Bakugo comes through to counter Dark Shadow, Izuku will counter Bakugo. So there is no way of defeating them in this regard. I mean, the only chance that people have to defeat Izuku is in the 1-versus-1 battles. They would keep their headband and the cavalry battle would be wrapped up and finished. Izuku has made his statement. Izuku has shown everybody what he's truly made of. I mean, come on. He didn't shy away from the obstacle course race, the cavalry battle. He's shown everything. He's unfolded his cards, his whole deck, and he showed that he's really a force to be reckoned with. Truly a force. But before the first one-on-one battle, Izuku would learn something. Hitoshi Shinso, someone he doesn't know much about from the general studies, has a quirk that is very, very interesting. A brainwashing quirk. A quirk that would more or less instantly win you a fight. Izuku hears about this from one of his classmates and is told to watch out for it. But Izuku thinks, this guy, he made it so far. How did he make it this far? This is insane. From the general studies? I mean, that takes a mastermind right there. I mean, you gotta respect it, right? Izuku would get to the stage, and when he does, Hitoshi Shinso would already be talking to him. But Izuku would look at him and give a bit of a zipper to his mouth and closes his mouth. As he does this, metal in a form of a metal face mask would just appear on Izuku's face and cover his mouth entirely. And Shinso would look at this and would just sigh. He would know it's over. I mean, he's obviously been told what his quirk is, and he's obviously, well, been shown how to beat it, or how to beat him. Shinso is deflated, pissed, and he tries to mock Izuku, but Izuku waves him over and tells him, and kind of waves him into kind of action. He doesn't even want to fight Shinso with his quirk. He wants to fight Shinso hand to hand. He goes to the middle of the stage and begins pointing at the ground and waves him over, and continues to point at the ground and waves him over some more. He tells him that, or more or less tells him through hand signals, that he wants to fight right now. Let's go. In which Shinso would run over as he would throw a long looping punch. Izuku would shake his head and immediately tell he has no combat experience. Izuku has minor combat experience. Don't get me wrong. He doesn't have anything crazy. He's never been into like severe martial arts classes, this and that, but he's seen a ton of stuff and he's worked on a ton of stuff. So when Shinso throws this looping overhand right, I mean, he immediately kicks him in the stomach and then follows up with the 1-2 to his face. And Izuku shakes his head and just shrugs, like, why haven't you worked on any of this? I mean, your quirk is built for brainwashing. What, you thought you were just going to lean on your quirk? This would frustrate Izuku. Kicking him in the stomach and then kneeing him in the head, Izuku would wave his hands and put his hands up as if like he's confused and frustrated with Shinso as he continues to piece up Shinso, beating him. I'm not gonna lie, he's actually hitting him pretty damn hard. He then shows Shinso that he could have done a bow staff, making a bow staff in front of him as he throws the bow staff off of the stage, and then he shows that he could have made some sort of knuckles and that he could be hitting him even harder, but he makes them disappear as well, and he shows his hands. He doesn't say a word to Shinso. This is all through just movement and showing him certain things, and as if he's showing Shinso that if he wants to be a hero, he needs to do more than just rely on his quirk. He hits Shinso in the stomach and then uppercuts him right to the jaw. And as he leads up with a side kick straight to Shinso's stomach, Shinso would more or less clench in pain. I mean, he's holding his stomach, he's looking up, and Izuku, well, he takes off his metal face mask, throwing it to the side, and then raises a hand and says he quits. Izuku would step off the stage and everybody would be shocked. What the hell? What did he just do? Bakugo, even him, he would be pissed. Bakugo would be so mad, saying that Izuku, that he can't quit, or, well, Deku, he can't quit, and it would over and over would scream toward Deku, but Izuku tells Shinso that if he wants to get stronger, he should strengthen his whole body, work on his quirk, but also work on everything else. After he does that, he'll truly know if he can be a hero. Izuku says that he personally might be blessed, but it still took time and effort for him to train, to get stronger. Izuku looks to see he is outside the ring and that he officially lost. And in a way, he wanted to win all of this. He wanted to prove to everybody that he's so much better. But at the same time, this was good. This was good enough for him. Izuku would use the metal around to make a staircase to the top, going immediately to his classmates, and sits down. Everybody would ask why he did that, but he would look towards Shinso and just nod, and then tell all of them that kid, he has so much potential. His quirk, well, let's just say everybody would think he would be a villain, but he's not. He's trying to be a hero, and in his eyes, that's the biggest step you can, the biggest leap you can do to become a hero. Izuku says that he just needs to work, train, and get stronger, and then they'll be seeing him in their class very soon. But that is the end of part 2. Izuku Midoriya watches the UA Sports Festival as he knows that he just sacrificed, well, any other bit of motivation and any other bit of momentum that would be given, or that would be shown and given to via the agencies. He kind of basically threw it away. And in all reality, does it really matter in the long run? Probably not. Izuku decided to do this in favor of Shinso, feeling that he could actually get something out of this. And of course he definitely would. I mean, people would get a lot more eyes on Shinso, especially with him going deeper into the 1-versus-1 fights, but of course he would eventually lose. That would just be a foregone conclusion. But still, he would do decently well and show some signs of being a real hero. Izuku, though, would watch as everyone would finish up the UA Sports Festival, watching Bakugo and Todoroki take on each other, fight to the very, very end, Bakugo screaming at Todoroki to use his fire side, but it still seems that he's hesitant. Izuku would shake his head and even begin to speak from the crowd, screaming as if Todoroki could even hear him, yelling him to use that fire side. But in all reality, nobody's hearing him. Nobody hears what's happening, and nobody's going to hear much, if anything. So let's just be real. I mean, Izuku isn't heard and can't be seen, and Todoroki doesn't really know what he's even saying. But still, I mean, the thought is there, but Todoroki would still end up losing to Bakugo. The loss to Bakugo is something that Todoroki will hold near and close to his heart, and Bakugo himself would be frustrated. I mean, we all know Bakugo wanted to take down Izuku. That's one of the frustrations. And the other frustration is the fact that, well, Todoroki did try. I mean, yes, in a technical sense, he did try, but in terms of, well, utilizing his quirk to his utmost capabilities and using the fire side of his quirk, he didn't try. And in Bakugo's book, that is so much worse than win, or so much worse than just losing flat out. Bakugo would rather him lose to a Todoroki using all of his power, and compared to, well, a Todoroki that's literally not even, well, using half of his power technically, right? So overall, Bakugo would be fuming with frustration, and on top of that would just be freaking out the entire time, yelling, screaming, saying that this isn't right, and saying that he needs to fight the best to truly be deemed as the best, and blah blah blah, so on and so forth, showing basically his full deck of cards right in front of everybody. Bakugo is kind of just shut up by putting a muzzle on him, and Izuku watches on as more or less Bakugo continues to freak out. Izuku doesn't really take this too much into account. I mean, let's be honest, he's seen Bakugo do some really stupid things over the years, and he's seen him get far madder than this. But still, I mean, we all know that there's going to be implications to what he's done and what he's freaking out over. But hey, I mean, I guess we'll have to see in the long run what happens. All Izuku wants to focus on is what's to come next. What does he have in front of him that needs to come next? Well, that's pretty obvious. The internships are coming up very, very soon, and Izuku is known by many all around, well, Japan. I mean, he's shown what he could truly do, even in the first bit of the obstacle course race and also the cavalry battle. So there's really no instance where Izuku wouldn't get a ton of offers, but it's really just what offers will he get? What type of offers will he get? And, well, who will he be able to even go and more or less internship with? He would look through his list as Aizawa would tell everybody to do so, and he would look through it to find that, well, he has some interesting choices. Nothing that is like too pop out, stand out, and insane, but he continues to look more and more and more, and eventually he would see something odd. It was as if it was at the bottom of the page, but he wonders why it was even at the bottom of the page. I mean, this is insane. He looks to see that it's actually Todoroki's father, other known as Endeavor. Endeavor, for some reason, wants to have Izuku come and actually work with Todoroki, but he wonders why. I mean, probably because he wants to have his son get stronger, and he doesn't really care about Izuku at all, but he wants to know more. Why, or what excites him or shows him that Izuku's powers alone would and will help Todoroki in the long run. So that's what he wants to know, and that's what he'll figure out soon. Izuku would watch as a car would pull up, and he would hop in that car and take it to Endeavor's agency. He would meet with Endeavor and also meet with Todoroki, but Endeavor would be screaming at Izuku the entire time, telling him that there is nothing that Izuku will learn here. It's only to help Todoroki. Izuku kind of shrugs this off. He doesn't really care and believes that this is the best approach, at least to train with somebody as strong as Todoroki, and just indirectly learn from Endeavor. Endeavor says he won't teach Izuku anything, but anything that he teaches to Todoroki, Izuku will be able to benefit from. So he begins to train with Todoroki, showing Todoroki what he can do and what Todoroki should be utilizing his quirk for. Izuku, through the power of, well, his very own Talk no Jutsu, would more or less get Todoroki to utilize his fire side, because his fire side is something that is very powerful and something that he can definitely use in the long run. And on top of that, he should be able to use his quirk because it's his quirk, not because it's someone else's quirk, and not because it's his father's or he has to worry about it being his father's quirk. But still, Izuku finally gets him to utilize both sides, the ice and the fire, and he tells Todoroki that utilizing it in full control is what truly matters. He wants to utilize it to the best of their abilities, and, well, he needs to realize that there's going to be downsides to everything. For his quirk, a 1 versus 1 may be beneficial. That's unless they get close to him, and that's unless he can't use his range to his advantage. What happens when someone gets right in his face? Izuku would show this as he uses his metal manipulation to more or less close the distance toward Todoroki. And eventually when he gets that close, it feels that Todoroki is kind of in a different world. He's in a different headspace, in a different, place entirely. This is so much more difficult when someone is up close and personal, and Izuku made that clear, telling him that this is exactly what's going to happen. I mean, it's just a matter of time before he runs into somebody that can close the distance, just like he did right now. Of course, Todoroki would take this to heart. He has some respect for Izuku, and Izuku continues to gain respect by the days. And after a while would pass, they would finally go out to Hosu City and finally take toward more or less a bit of a patrol. This patrol would set them up in the long run. This patrol would more or less tell them exactly where they are in the spectrum of being a hero. Izuku wants to know what it's like to patrol, what it's like to go out there like a real hero and protect people. And let's just say he'll definitely be able to do so because an attack on Hosu City, the very own place that they were going to just patrol on, is exactly what they have to deal with. So when Izuku arrives, and so does Todoroki and Endeavor, they have to fend off a ton of Nomus and villains alike, in which Izuku and Todoroki together are actually pretty good. I mean, their tandem alone is pretty good. I mean, we're talking about high firepower with containment. Izuku can contain the villain, restrain them, and more or less allow Todoroki to hit a villain or a Nomu extremely hard. But this is when Izuku realizes something. The Nomus that are there, all these creatures, he begins to kind of feed metal into them, and he wonders if he can really utilize them, kind of like puppets in a way. He does feel that there's metal already within them as well, and he thinks that the villains truly haven't learned their lesson. I mean, yes, they may know about his quirk, but to what extent can Izuku utilize his quirk is what they don't know. He might be able to use just specks of metal scrap. I mean, maybe not right now, but in the future, he'd be able to use just little tiny specks, be able to control anything within their bodies, maybe rip all of the metal out of them and obliterate them in a second. But Izuku doesn't even know if he can do this yet. I mean, there's probably a good chance he can't do this, but still, it's a thought that Izuku has. He feeds metal into a Nomu that he finds, and he begins to slightly control it, and actually is able to neutralize it to a certain degree, and eventually would extract the metal out. Izuku would put the metal away back in his pockets and kind of have it just strapped to his leg, and that's all it took. It actually worked out pretty well. I mean, Izuku's pretty shocked about how well it turned out, but still, I mean, that's something insane. But during this time, Izuku has a realization that connects all of the things he has in mind. I mean, we're talking about the people around him, the people everywhere around him, and also the person that actually made him worry when he heard him on a cell phone. But at the same time, he forgot about this, not thinking too much about it. I mean, there's no way he would do something extremely drastic, right? He begins to hear Manuel screaming for Tenya Ida, asking if anybody has seen Tenya Ida. If anyone has seen him, he needs to find him. Izuku would freak out, thinking that Tenya must have followed through with something that is horrible, that is something he should have never done. Izuku immediately would climb a building and begin to dart off. Using the metal, he makes a bit of a surfboard and he begins to fly through the air looking for Tenya. Eventually, he would come across the alleyway that he sees a villain down on the ground, practically at his last leg, and Tenya Ida about to be stabbed through the chest by the hero killer. The hero killer goes to stab Tenya through the chest, but his blade stops midair and is unable to move. Just as the blade is about to be pulled back by Stain, the metal on the blade would break into pieces and would fly up to the sky. Izuku would catch all of them, balling them up into just a metal ball and putting it back in his pocket as he lands on the ground, telling the hero killer that this is not a fight he wants. He taps on his phone as it sends a signal out to Todoroki and also a group chat that he's in of where their location currently is at. Todoroki is currently fighting with his father but now he's on hot pursuit on his way to help with Izuku's problem. Izuku would push back Stain using any means he possibly can. The blades that Stain has, though, let's just say, are practically useless. Izuku has dulled them and destroyed them right before the fight even began, so all it is Stain trying to fight with hand-to-hand combat. And if he tries to leave and retreat, in which something Stain won't do anyways, but if he tries, Izuku can easily stop him, very quickly too. All he needs, though, is Todoroki to give him the opening. He wants one opening. As he thinks this, and as he begins to have this thought process, ice begins to cover the area as it shoots through, grabbing Stain just enough to where Izuku can collapse metal all over Stain, chaining him down to the ground and eventually pinning him entirely. Without his blades and with only raw strength, there's no way Stain will be able to get out of the chains that are placed on him. Izuku continues to pile onto him and eventually would contain him entirely. Izuku would thank Todoroki for the assist, and Todoroki would just be shocked so much that he can't really respond to what Izuku just said. Izuku asks if he's okay, and Todoroki says he is. He's just kind of in awe at the fact that Izuku was able to do something like, well, that. How was he able to do something like that? Izuku just tells him that he's been utilizing his quirk and training with it for a while. So, I mean, he would hope that he can do stuff like this to give them the upper hand. But with that said, they would await the other heroes to arrive, in which when they did, Izuku would be forced to not take the credit for taking down Stain. But luckily, they saved Tenya Ida, they saved the hero native, and also they didn't have any other casualties. They didn't even really get injured themselves. I mean, Tenya did, but the rest of them didn't. Todoroki and Izuku didn't get injured at all. I mean, this was kind of a perfect scenario for Izuku himself, but still. After the fact though, Endeavor would get the credit for defeating the hero killer, and Izuku and Todoroki and also Tenya Ida would rest up in the hospital right before they're sent off back to UA. When they're sent back to UA, Aizawa would lecture them about what they did and how they did it, but still would tell them that they have a final exam to look forward to, so that's what they should be worrying about. They have a written and also a practical. He looks toward Izuku and says that they can thank Izuku, or they can thank Midoriya, for how they're going to be doing the practical now. But that's all he'll say. He won't spoil the fun. Of course, Aizawa would stop talking, and everybody else would go about their days studying and getting ready for the final exam, because, well, the true final, the practical final, would be against the teachers. Izuku has shown them that robots are far, 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 far away from being practical. So the heroes decide to take all of them on themselves. I mean, this would be beneficial for the students and also their growth overall. So that's exactly what they're going to be doing, and that's exactly what's going to happen. Izuku would watch as all of his classmates get paired up with someone else, and also with a hero or with a teacher. Izuku would watch as everybody would fall in line, but eventually it would lead to him and Bakugo, two people that really don't get along, but at least have minor mutual respect. Izuku would basically tell Bakugo not to do anything stupid based on whoever they fight, and Bakugo kind of shrugs him off, saying that he'll do whatever he wants, but eventually the person that they'll be fighting shows up, and that is the one and only number one hero, All Might. Now this right here is exciting. Izuku is excited to an extent, but at the same time, he knows that this isn't the easiest and, well, is kind of an extremely hard matchup. I mean, there is no way around it. He has no idea how strong he truly is, and if All Might would be able to just break free from him, just be of pure strength. He has no idea. So they're gonna have to be creative. But Bakugo refuses to be creative. He says that he'll fight All Might by himself and he doesn't care. Izuku hears this and just gets frustrated. I mean, this guy, he's really stupid. But still, he awaits the gates to swing open for their final exam and their final practical exam, and when they do, they charge forward. Izuku grabs Bakugo and, using a surfboard, flies forward faster than Bakugo would be able to explode. Of course, Bakugo explodes as well, so that they sling forward at insane speeds. Izuku would throw Bakugo forward, and before All Might could really even react, Bakugo was in his face, landing a massive punch and then an explosion. Izuku would follow up with metal spikes, sending All Might's way, but All Might would be able to just punch them and they would shatter to pieces. Izuku shakes his head as he continues to throw these metal spikes, as All Might would shatter them to pieces, metal scraps going everywhere as All Might does so. Eventually though, Izuku would get so much metal scraps from all around All Might from just throwing these small metal spikes that he would begin to actually utilize them to wrap All Might's legs. He does this and he makes All Might trip quickly, and it gives Bakugo a free explosion straight to the face of All Might. In doing so, this gives Bakugo a ton of openings, but Izuku can tell that they're not really getting anywhere. All he really has to do is escape. But of course, Bakugo's not going to want to do that, and he's not going to leave Bakugo here and while he escapes. So he stays. He continues to fight with Bakugo, trying to give him any openings, but it seems like there's just no way. I mean, there's no way All Might is going to fall to these little explosions, even when they start ramping up the explosions with the sweat that Bakugo has. Izuku, as a last-ditch effort, would maintain All Might, would basically push him and force him into place as Bakugo rips his strongest explosion possible. He does this, and Izuku more or less covers All Might as the explosion enters range, and it more or less condenses the explosion into one area. But as Izuku sees his metal shatter and break, All Might seems to be completely unharmed. Frustration would grow over Bakugo and Izuku's face. How are they supposed to do this? What is happening? How is All Might just not taking damage? But eventually Izuku would feel something. It would feel odd, as if he can see everything around him that's metal once again. He could feel the lampposts, the ground beneath him, the small bits of metal, or at least metal-like objects beneath them, the buildings, Bakugo's gauntlets, or partial parts of his gauntlets. All Might. Wait, there's metal within All Might. There's metal within Bakugo. Wait a minute. Izuku reaches out his hand and begins to focus harder than he's ever before, and he begins to focus on All Might himself, focusing so hard that eventually All Might is stuck in place, unable to move. Izuku is shocked, but All Might was wondering what is happening. There's no metal shards within him. How did he do that? How is he still? Wait. All Might realizes that there are small traces of metal within one's body. Yes, it's so minor. Yes, it's so minuscule. But can he really control that deep into someone's body? All Might looks over toward Izuku and feels that he needs to break free and more or less get Izuku out of here, because if he doesn't, well, that might become a major issue. Izuku would begin to send metal more and more toward All Might while he's giving himself the opening. Bakugo continues to attack, and eventually one of the explosions and one of the metal pieces would reach right to All Might's, place where it isn't the best to be hit. Near his rib cage and also his lungs, a piece of metal and basically a spike and an explosion would reach it, hitting it at just the right spot that Bakugo and Izuku would actually land a clean blow to All Might. All Might winces in pain, and eventually they're able to get the capture tape around All Might, and they beat him. Everyone is completely shocked. I mean, this is All Might we're talking about. Did they just win? Of course, yeah, they did. And their teamwork is pretty damn good. I mean, that's undeniable, even if their coordination isn't the best sometimes. But their relationship obviously hinders the coordination just a little bit. But still, I mean, they did a hell of a job to neutralize the way they did, and it showed exactly where they were in terms of, well, how good of teammates or future heroes they truly are going to be. With that said, though, of course, everyone's more or less final exam is over. Izuku is finally done with his, and now it's time for them to speak about what they're going to be doing next. The forest training camp was something that, to be threatened, if you didn't pass, you wouldn't be going. But that's actually not 100% true. You are still able to go even if you didn't pass. They would all be sent to the forest training camp, and the same old things would more or less happen. They would go there, they would get kicked off the bus, and they would get kicked off the mountain, and they would fight their way to the forest training camp. Izuku, on the arrival, would more or less figure out what they're going to be doing, what they're going to be doing to train, and Izuku is just excited to begin training, excited to begin just working and trying to get better. Izuku, in doing so, is just more or less trying to manipulate all the metal within the ground. Anything he can feel, anything that is out there, anything with even just a scrap, a tiny little minuscule, tiny, very little bit of metal he wants to be able to manipulate. And that's exactly what he's going to be working on. Will he be able to successfully do this all the time? Most likely not. I mean, this is something that he'll need to hone and get ready and learn how to do for a long time, or at least that's what it feels like. With that said, though, there's some things that would go extremely wrong in the forest training camp. Izuku decides that during one of the dinners, he'll bring some food to a little kid by the name of Koda. Yes, they've had a interesting run-in, and Izuku might have blocked his bit of his nut punch with, a piece of metal, which wasn't the nicest thing to do, but also punching somebody in the family jewels is also not the nicest thing to do. But still, Izuku would go over to bring him food. When he would arrive, Koda wouldn't be too happy about this. He would arrive on his surfboard, more or less telling Koda that he really should eat. I mean, a young boy like him, he needs to grow. Gotta get strong. Izuku laughs it off, and Koda makes fun of him because obviously Izuku's not the biggest kid in the world. So he kind of asks if he's just, never eats anyways, or at least never eats himself. Izuku would say that's kind of messed up. I mean, come on, dude. That's not cool. But still, Izuku would tell him that it's some good food. He hands it over, and as they're talking, well, a voice from the forest would peek out and creep out, telling them that there's really no way for them to escape, and there's no chance they're going to live. Izuku turns, and well, let's just say a monster, a creature of some sorts. No, it's a man, a giant man would peek out, saying that both of them will be dying right now. Because, well, they don't need them. All they need is one Katsuki Bakugo. Izuku is shocked. They want Bakugo? Of course, Izuku steps in front of Koda, telling him to leave now, that he'll handle this. Muscular would tell Izuku that it's real impressive and real heroic. I mean, he's really, really, really impressed. But let's be honest, he has no chance here. There is no way Izuku will be beating him, and there's no way he'll be getting out of here alive. Izuku shakes his head, saying that's the farthest from the truth, and he can trust that. The fight between Muscular and Izuku is upon us, but that is for the next part of What If Deku Had a Metal Manipulation Quirk. The fight between Izuku Midoriya and Muscular begins. Izuku would begin fending him off, just trying to allow Koda to leave, but Koda would be in complete and utter shock, not being able to really move. I mean, he is just a young kid, a young boy, so of course he's terrified. I mean, this is a freak of nature that is standing in front of him. Who wouldn't be terrified of someone that is this big and this scary? So he kind of sits there and he's basically just petrified over the idea that this monster of a man is coming to kill them. Izuku is able to relatively easily hold off Muscular, but Muscular begins to bluff about how strong he truly is. So this does put Izuku in a weird spot, eventually leading to him letting go of Muscular just slightly enough to where, well, it puts Koda in harm's way. Koda refuses to leave by the request of Izuku. He tells him over and over again just to run away, and Koda would eventually get caught with a stray boulder. This boulder would be thrown toward Izuku, but when Izuku tries to stop it, shatter it into pieces, it actually puts multiple shards of these sharp rocks within Koda. Koda begins to bleed, and Izuku tries to more or less take the shards out of him and try to like more or less mitigate the damage as much as possible, but nothing's really working and nothing's really helping. He sees that Koda is bleeding extremely bad, and he's trying to help the kid. Immediately though, he would feel Koda's pulse slowly but surely weaken, and his eyes would droop to the ground. Izuku not only knows that these villains are after Bakugo, but he now knows that Koda is going to die. He grabs Koda and puts him on his shoulders, and all he can feel is the slow pulse of Koda onto his back. He looks toward Muscular, and Muscular is about to attack them once again, but the metal within the ground, the metal within all the entirety of the mountain begins to more or less make spikes, immediately grabbing Muscular, penetrating his arms and legs, grounding him entirely. The eye socket that Muscular has, the metal within his eye, he would then begin to feel it go back toward his head. Izuku begins to slam the metal within the brain of Muscular, and eventually the body of Muscular would lay limp out entirely. Muscular is dead. Izuku can feel the blood of Koda on his back. Now this is something that he never realized would even happen or even could occur. He thought he could save everybody. He was wrong. He would throw a piece of metal on the ground as he surfs on a surfboard like a material or surfboard like item, and he heads back to where Aizawa currently is. When he arrives, he tells Aizawa that this is some serious matters. He needs to help Koda. He needs to save him. But as he hands Koda over, the blood loss was too great, and Koda is dead. Izuku is in complete shock, unable to fathom the idea that he just allowed someone to die right next to him, allowed someone to be killed. But as quick as more or less him saving or trying to save Koda and defeating Muscular or killing Muscular, everything in the forest goes quiet. Everything entirely goes quiet. Izuku realizes what's happening. They already finished the mission. They have Bakugo. A rush of just anger would flow over Izuku. He not only failed Koda, but he failed Bakugo. They might have not been the bestest of friends. They might have not been, well, the best people to each other. And Bakugo may have not been the best person to Izuku. But still, he's still his friend. The next step for the heroes is to save Katsuki Bakugo. The next step is to save him. Everybody is more or less brought to the hospital, Izuku included, and Aizawa would explain to Izuku what he did. That's just something they're going to need to speak about, something that they're going to need to figure out whatever comes next. Izuku hears him, but he's not truly listening. All he can think about is the way to locate Bakugo, and he hears from somebody that Momo Yaoyorozu has a way of tracking where they are. Izuku immediately during the night would go over to her room and would ask for a copy of that tracker. He wants the location. She says that's a horrible idea, that he's already in trouble for doing whatever he did, and Izuku says that he doesn't care. He wants the tracker. He needs the tracker. Momo would eventually be convinced to give Izuku that said tracker, but really only because, well, he agrees that he'll bring a bunch of the other students as well. But once he gets the tracker, well, let's just say he goes back on that promise relatively quickly. He would bolt off faster than anybody else could really even keep up, and even Momo admits that there was a high likelihood of him doing this. She didn't 100% believe him when he said that he would stick around and team up. There's something different about Izuku right now. Something far different. It's as if he knows now that every life is sacred, that every single life is important, but he knows that for the greater good, he needs to do certain things that a hero cannot and will not do. Izuku may not even be looking at himself as a hero right now. He's no hero in training. He's no hero. All he can think about is getting Bakugo back and stopping whatever is to come. When he arrives at the location of the tracker, he would see exactly what's going on and where it's come from. It's an army of Nomus. We're talking hundreds, maybe, experimented on, controlled, so on and so forth. Izuku would then feel something, an idea. This idea. He would grab the side of the building, and a bunch of the extra pieces of metal all around the building would then begin to creep into this giant warehouse, embedding itself within each and every single Nomu. Izuku was now just waiting for the right time. And that right time would come, because Bakugo would be saved, or at least that's what they believe. Bakugo would be more or less saved by the heroes, but All For One would send him through a portal, leading us to the final standing ground of All Might versus All For One. Izuku would see the fight about to begin. Bakugo slowly but surely losing ground against the League of Villains. But just as he begins to lose that ground, well, all they could hear is the rumblings. Footsteps running. No, these are heavy creatures, heavy people. All they hear is loud stomps. Bakugo looks over to see an army of Nomus. He's in shock, but he looks toward, well, Shigaraki and them, and he sees that they are just as shocked as everyone else. That may be a good sign. Izuku commands all the Nomus, moving all of them using his metal manipulation and, well, his metal bending, and controlling every single one of them at the same time. The League of Villains would all be subdued in a matter of seconds using all the Nomus. All For One would look in complete shock, trying to command the Nomus to stop. All Might would land a punch that would more or less take All For One off his feet. But in a matter of seconds, a Nomu would grab All For One by the leg, and another Nomu would grab him by the leg, slamming him to the ground, and they began to throw him into the air. He would stop midair, and all the metal on his body would then begin to change, wrap around him like cords, and beginning to hang him. He would then be squeezed so hard that he could feel his ribs breaking into pieces, and eventually his life would be taken. All Might is shocked. What did he just watch? What was that? Who was that? He turns to see one person, and it's Izuku. His eyes say a million, maybe even a trillion words. Izuku is not the person he was before. Death made him, well, different. And he knew that the only way to stop a villain group like this, like them, was death. All Might may have disagreed with that idea in the past. Maybe even Izuku in the past would have disagreed with that idea. But right now, he's not thinking 100% straight. He kills All For One, he would kill the League of Villains, and an army of Nomus would run rampant, destroying and killing and obliterating every single villain that was there. All Might, Aizawa, and many others would see this, and Izuku would be deemed as a high threat, as someone that is not, well, or should not be free. Many argue, saying that he's a kid. He has nothing to do anything. It doesn't matter. And even some of the heroes, including Aizawa, on the down low would more or less harbor Izuku, trying to get him away and him more or less escape whatever is going on at this moment. Izuku would be in housing that nobody really knows about, but eventually it would all come down to this. Izuku would have one thing that he felt was redemption for himself, one thing that he felt, well, needed to happen. Izuku would appear at a police office, an area that, well, he didn't want to be at, and he would say that he was turning himself in. everybody would be shocked. I mean, multiple heroes, a lot of them believe that Izuku was fine, that he was a good kid, that he did what he believed to be best. Yes, he did take a life of somebody, but we're talking about someone like All For One, a terrible person, a horrible person. But at the end of the day, a death is a death, and, well, a violent killer is still a violent killer. And yes, in the grand scheme of things, this may help the world in greater ways than anybody could possibly imagine. But at least, he was able to help for the foreseeable future, even if he's deciding to put himself behind bars. A special prison would need to be made for Izuku, completely made out of plastic and materials that have no metal content at all. Izuku would be more or less chained up by all of these things that literally don't even allow him to move at all. Yes, many people believe Izuku should be free. He's just a kid. I mean, everybody makes mistakes, right? But Izuku knows that he should be in prison. And if they were to ever need his help, if they were to ever need Izuku Midoriya once again, they knew where to find him. At least, that's the benefit of this. But it does worry him. He does fear whatever's to come. But luckily, All Might has his successor, and his successor is extremely powerful. So, whatever's to come, let's just hope they're able to handle it on their own. Because we can all agree that Izuku has made this world entirely better with the death of not only All For One, but the League of Villains. There's a lot more to fear in the world. There's a lot more to deal with. But at least this is a stepping stone to making the world completely and utterly peaceful, even if All Might isn't the one protecting it. With that said, if you enjoyed the series of What If Deku had a metal manipulation quirk, well, then leave a like, leave a sub, and leave a comment down below. Sorry it took so long to finish the series. Sorry it took so long for me to post some of these episodes. I hope y'all still enjoyed, and I appreciate all the support, and I hope all y'all have an amazing day. Later.